Hello and welcome to China Focus. I'm Shelley Zhang. Could the next big debt crisis come from China? Well, on the surface, it seems like there's nothing to worry about. But if that's the case, why are more and more people talking about China's debt? And do the balance sheets reflect what's really going on in China's economy? Today, here to talk about this, at the first part in the series, we have NTD's China analysts Chen Zhifei and Jason Ma. So thanks for joining us. So let's kind of give people a little background on China's debt issues. How much debt does China have?
Well, there are numbers flying around, from different quarters of the world. I thought I saw the official number coming at around 9.2 billion Chinese yuan, but some internal experts, a trillion yuan, some internal experts, such as the prominent Chinese economist Wu Jinlian, he put a number at 16 trillion Chinese yuan.
So that's a huge discrepancy. What's the difference coming from?
Oh, because everything's pretty kind of secretive over there. All the debt, most of the debt are indeed owned by the local government. And the local government themselves cannot borrow money. They have to establish some kind of investment kind of a vehicle. And those are in the form of some companies, and then use companies to borrow money. And and how much they borrowed, you don't know. And also, how well their development go, you don't know. You
were talking about local government debt and these financing vehicles, but I was under the impression that local governments weren't allowed to borrow.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Local government, they cannot borrow because they don't want, the central government don't want the local government bankrupt. So they ask the local government to establish some investment vehicle, which is some kind of a company, and then they use the company to borrow money. Under kind of
so they do have debt, it's just kind of hiding.
Right.
Yeah. The hiding debt, and even the thing have evolved to such an extent that the local government really need the money from the public to finance the showpiece project that the central government has allowed them starting from this year. Because the rule came out last December that the local government can go out, issue bonds on their own, under their own name. So the door is now open for them to, the public floodgate for them to get money directly from the government, from the local public.
So to talk about, again, let's go back to the larger idea of China's debt. So you're saying a lot of it has come from the local government. Where else is the debt coming from? Does the central government have debt?
So central government has zero debt. Actually, that make people think China would not have as much debt issue as the U.S. government has, because U.S. government taking a lot of entitlement program resulted debts. But in China, the things are entirely different. In China, I think the local government is the primary target of these concerns. They took on debt to finance the local land sale and projects, and now they also use this as a driver to propel the GDP growth.
Right, there are some form kind of central government liability. For example, the railroad company is kind of basically central government kind of owned something. So they, like the high-speed train system, right now they do carry a lot of debt. Finally, that may be the liability of the central government. But I think the point here to make is the major reason for Chinese to own debt is because of all this construction structure instead of the entitlement kind of program.
So you're saying they're not spending it on social security, on welfare?
No. For those kind of things, because right now they just carry a very light kind of social liability kind of network. So they don't really have much burden to them. All those debts come from this crazy construction projects, and which is totally different from what is happening in U.S. U.S. is probably spend 50 to 60% of their income on those welfare program. If they get rid of any part of them, they will have debt free. Yeah.
That's also why people are raising issues about China's debt. And it's not so much that the central government had a lot of things to worry about, like you mentioned in the opening remark, but the debt issue is really a reflection of general Chinese economy's health, because local government use it to inflate the GDP. If this driver stalls, then GDP will slow. That's the number one concern. Secondly, this will have ripple effects among the financial sector, because the money all come out of those big state-owned banks, particularly the big four. So if the local government have default on the loans, then those banks would have to be there, would be left carrying the bag. And how the central government resolve that issue, that could be a repeat of the financial crisis that hit the country in the 90s. So these are all issues that are unique, that are peculiar to China, which is absent in the United States.
What happened in the 90s?
I think the inflation. Basically, because right now most of the debt are owned by Chinese people themselves. So the Chinese government have a very easy solution to their debt, which is inflation. Basically, once they print enough amount of money, they will just kind of get rid of their debt quickly, which is happening really in the 90s. Like the inflation can be 100%, and then and also
I don't think this is a trouble-free solution. In the 90s, the whole economy is very much closed. It's not as open as today, and the government is really now trying to pump up the demand, and the effects or the fallout of this solution using inflation to resolve the debt issue would be the purchasing power of the public will suffer, and that's what happened in the 90s. But like I said, at that time it wouldn't be as acute as what you're going to see if the result is the same kind of method today.
But as you said, they begin to issue bond. I think that's basically a way to kind of shift some burden from the bank to the public.
So with the bond, what's happening is you were talking about they had these investment vehicles. The companies.
No.
So that's now they're stopping doing that and going into directly selling.
The government is selling bond to the people. I mean, so I guess basically because from the vehicle they borrow money from the bank, but the bank right now carry a lot of probably kind of debts, which is potentially be a huge liability for the central government. So the central government now gives the order like local government can borrow money from people because they know if the people hold their debt, I mean, they can always figure a way, for example, inflation, to get rid of those debts quicker.
So let's talk about, you're talking about the debt is a lot of it's going to finance these projects, like these infrastructure projects, the projects that build GDP. It seems like, on the balance books, like the Chinese debt as a percentage of GDP doesn't seem so bad.
Right. I mean, you just can't do this kind of thing, compare what's the accounting system in US you are using and then in China. Yeah, in US, the 50%, more than 50% of the money is spent on those welfare system. And those welfares are useful in the sense of they buy some justice and they keep the society stable in some sense. But China, they don't really invest in that part. They use their pressure, the information control to maintain the stability. And meanwhile, they kind of give very little money, if there are any, back to the people. They spend all the money on the construction so that all the people can get money, official can get money out of these projects. But meanwhile, there is debt, which is the instability of China, and all the hatred between people and the government and all these kind of things, which you should kind of translate into some kind of debt, because that's something the government should pay to the people. They didn't. And so this is something you have to figure out a number to put it. If you put that number, give that kind of instability a number, then you will know Chinese debt is not kind of insignificant in any sense.
So you're saying the infrastructure projects aren't really to benefit the people?
Infrastructure definitely benefit people to a certain extent. Take a high-speed rail system as an example. However, those are not wise investment projects. Oftentimes, when the economy slows, the government would use infrastructure projects to prop up their GDP. So oftentimes we see those projects going nowhere, and it has remained a problem that whether the Chinese government can return the debts they have taken to finance the projects. So those will suffer, and eventually, like I argued earlier, the public will have to shoulder the burden, and the demand will suffer. For now, I think the way to look at Chinese debt is a general indicator of the economy and the people's demand. And it's not just an economic matter, but it's also a social issue. If that issue continue unchecked, then people will have a lot of discontent against government because, like Jason described, the government will use inflation to help them return the money, to help them tide over the difficulties. And that will definitely fuel further round of social unrest and even government corruption. Another way to look at Chinese debt is the government finance projects and associated debts have become a hotbed. that breed corruption, because there's little accountability on the part of government officials to show where those debts, where those money go. And I guess, and a lot of people would agree with me, I think a lot of money borrowed by the local government actually go to the pockets of those officials, and that is another kind of unsavory aspect of Chinese debt.
So we're talking about the consequences right now.
Right. Basically, it's kind of like the corrupt Chinese government's debt. Although the number on the paper is small, but definitely they somewhat kind of make the Chinese economy unhealthy, because that's a way to, they just use this cheap money to pump up their GDP, which is a very, very poor way to develop GDP. Then they corrupt the society morally, because the debt is give the official kind of a resource corrupt. So I guess although the number on the surface is not big, but you just can't consider everything in China the same way as the US.
That's right. And the way Chinese economy goes, that is investment driven, has been tried before in other countries. There have some limited cases for success, but there are probably exceptions. But China has a lot of problems to itself that may not give its advantage to continue or sustain this mode of development forever. And that will come back to haunt the Chinese government and its people. And in the case of the U.S. economy, the U.S. government can print money forever, and always people lining up outside to buy its money. But this is not the case in China. So this debt issue will, like Democrats saw their hand over their head. I don't think how they are going to resolve it. That will become an issue we should discuss in the future.
Do you think that we are looking at a possible debt crisis?
I think when you see a general concept of debt, which is including the social injustice, all this, yes, Chinese is really in a debt crisis. Of course, it's not in the sense of kind of narrow sense of debt. Probably on the paper they are not. Yeah.
Okay, well, both of you, thank you so much for joining us to talk about this, and we'll be having more discussions about this in the future. And thank you for watching. For more on this and other issues in China, join us at ntd.tv.